Okay, welcome to Franchising Uncut, a BDC Partners podcast. I'm your host, Bruce McFarlane, my co-host, John Sully, and today we're here with franchising legal expert, Jane Garber Rosenzweig.
Hello.
Welcome.
Loved it. Huh?
Recently I wrote an article around the franchise, the law and the ethics of resales. I think it's a really interesting topic about the obligation of the franchisor in a really interesting time. So looking at from a franchisor's point of view, you've got, a franchisee who wants to exit and you're starting with a position that you want your franchisees to make a return on investment. You want them to be successful because then you can tell the story to the future franchisees about, then there was John and John, bought his first store and he sold it for double and it was great. And so those sorts of stories live on in the network as part of the legacy of the system. And so that's great. At the same time, the franchisee, John, he's checked out a little bit. He wants to sell and he wants to get out, if it's his first store, thinking about that. And so as a franchisor, you're looking ahead going, well, who's coming in? And how involved am I going to get in that process? And your alliances, your loyalties to the existing franchisee compared to the new potential franchisee, and different franchisors, they do it differently in terms of being very proactive and part of the process compared to being a little bit more reactive. And some of the brands that we've worked with where basically the franchisee does all the work and they go and sell their business and they come back to the franchisor and say, here you go, sold my business, there's your new guy. And even some that I've heard of, the transition takes place and the franchisor doesn't even really know that it's happened.
Yeah.
Like that's extreme. And the other extreme is you manage the whole process. So John, obviously at Michelle's, you had a lot of resales as part of that and more recently in other brands that you're working with. So what do you think is the role of the franchisor in a good system as to how they should act in a resale process?
Yeah, I think you need to control it as much as you can because in the Michelle's days, I've always said it, we were very good at getting people in, but we were very bad at getting them out. So they didn't have sorry, I'll take a step back. We effectively didn't have a process for that apart from go to a local broker. And going to a local broker, be they good or bad, just stuck an ad on and away he went, and they came up with a purchaser and if it was okay, they're okay. You sort of had to accept it, and it was a difficult line between allowing that person to get out because they usually, as you said, on the downhill slope, they've made the decision.
Emotionally, not necessarily from a profitability point of view.
Emotionally, that will definitely affect that anyhow. They just start doing less. It's just the nature of the beast. And because usually when you get someone out, you'll usually get somewhere between a 15 and a 25% increase in sales because they're rejuvenated, a new person. So we were very poor at that. And as a result of that, we had more and more of our franchises on the market because it took longer to get them out because the process was not slick. So in anything that we're doing going forward and the businesses that we've invested in now, we want to keep that process really tight and making sure that their numbers are absolutely spot on where we can, and then making sure that the person who's coming in is going to be the best for the business, but more importantly, the brand. Because it is about looking after the franchisee, but if you sell to the wrong person and the other franchisees around that person start dragging down the name of the brand through lack of service, lack of quality, whatever, then you've made a big mistake for everyone, not just that person. So you've got an obligation around that.
No, and I think that's right. And I think even at the start, whether it's a greenfields or whether it's a resale, that the conversations with the potential franchisee should be a topic of conversation.
Definitely.
Because, some systems they're in for 3, average, good ones 5, other systems are in for 10 and 15 years.
Yep.
But they're in for a time. Like they're going to get out at some point. So you need to think about that and what does that look like. So was that something that you clearly didn't have a great process at Michelle's, but didn't have a conversation about when they're going to leave the system?
No, we were shit.
Yeah,
it was terrible, and the Michelle's franchise was a bit of a stepping stone as well to a bigger franchise. That it was good entry level business, Whereas so let's say a business we've just invested in recently, that is, you got the opportunity that turning over $3, $4, $5 million and making a 20% bottom line. There are a lot of people in that business, as we're uncovering now, that are running lifestyle through their business. So the tax, that's the way you should be doing it. And
Tax minimalisation.
Is it avoidance or
Evasion?
Evasion.
Evasion's no good.
Yeah, evasion's
You
a bad one.
shouldn't be
Avoidance.
doing either, but yeah.
Yeah,
Minimize legally, but not.
Yes, that's right. Yeah, let's go with avoidance, and they're doing that, and that's fine. But it has an impact on the end value because you don't have those records. So you've got to make sure that that's absolutely spot on too.
And so, Jane, as a franchisor, we'll start with the current rules that are in place around. So the franchisee comes to you and says, "I want to sell my business." What happens now?
Well, good systems, I agree with John, good systems should actually control the process completely. And they've got sort of the two sides of the coin, because the new franchisee that comes on board needs to have the franchisor do all the right things, explain, sit down. We now have new obligations of explanations about significant capital expenditure, return on investment, and the franchisor actually has to make sure that there's reasonable opportunity for the new person to make return on investment, which...
Can I stop you there? Because I want to come back to that.
Yeah, we will come back to return on investment, but one thing I wanted to mention in this part is it becomes an issue for the franchisor, because the franchisor can't unreasonably withhold consent to a sale.
Yep.
He's got to have, obviously, certain things that need to be ticked. But what happens, for example, if the franchisor thinks that the current franchisee is selling for too much? Can the franchisor refuse the franchisee or the purchase price or the whole transaction?
But so without talking about value and price, because I do want to, what would be reasonable and unreasonable besides the price thing?
So they have to assess whether the new person obviously has any business experience, whether they have financial backing to have enough money to be able to run the business, have working capital.
It's exactly the same as their approval process for a greenfield. So
it's completely the same as approval for greenfields for the new person.
Yeah.
The old person, that there's also a process of what needs to happen. There's documentation, obviously exit of a franchise agreement, deed of surrender, etc.
Can I just ask a question on that? So
Sure.
what about if they've got all the money, all that sort of stuff all stacks up, but they're a dick?
Yeah, so that's what. So the thing is, and why I sort of wanted to stop the money bit and just talk about the other bit, because if the franchisee is selling their business, they don't really care, right?
No.
They just want to sell.
No.
And so they may not even remember what the approval process was, because they might have been in the system for 10 years.
Yeah.
And it might have changed, there might be a new owner or whatever.
Yep.
So they've got no idea what the approval process is. And so it comes up a bit about the franchisee saying, well, you're not approving this guy or this girl that's buying the business. I've sold to them. I've already signed the term sheet and we're at contract stage, and you're being unreasonable because you're not approving them. Well, because as a franchisor, take a step back. I've got to live with this person for the next 5 to 7 or 10
As
years.
do their peers.
As do their peers. And so they need to meet my criteria. And my criteria is, you got the money to buy the business. Tick. That's one. That's only one of the criteria.
Of course.
And so all those other things. And so I guess that's, have you seen situations where franchisors have not wanted to approve a sale? That's not to do with the money.
No.
Yeah.
I have seen the situations, and I've also seen disputes where franchisee was not allowed, the sale was stopped by the franchisor for whatever reason. And then the franchisee tried again, and the franchisor stopped the next person. And then it ended up in a massive dispute between the franchisor and the franchisee on the basis of whether it was reasonable or not. They ended up settling, but that's a separate issue. One other thing I'll mention is good systems, once again, have processes, and the processes of approval of the contract of sale, special conditions in the contract of sale that need to be ticked, and there should be quite a few for the franchisor of what each party needs to do for the exit to occur as well.
And another part of this, sorry, I'll jump in again, but another part of this which comes up a bit is where a franchisor has the right to buy the business. So most systems, the process where the franchisee has to offer it to the franchisor first. So,
is it only first or is it first and last?
Well, it's
anytime that they're supposed to offer
it's an agreement. Depends on what the agreement is.
Depends on the agreement.
That's not a code thing. That's a contract thing.
But in most contracts that I've seen, it will say they have to offer it to the franchisor on the same terms. So say if a franchisee is selling it for 100K to someone and then franchisor said no thanks, and then for some reason they agreed to reduce the price to 90, under most franchise agreements, first right of refusal, they would have to come back to the franchisor.
Right. So you go back again. So it's Now, so on that, and why I want to raise that is because some franchisors go for different reasons. That's a cracking site. I'm just going to buy it, and so I'm just going to not approve franchisee sales at the 100 because ultimately they're going to come back at me at 90 or 80, and I'm going to buy it at a bargain, and I'm going to keep it, and
That's
I'm going
not acting in good faith.
and I'm going to flip it. No, but I'm going to buy it, and I'll run.
Does that happen a lot?
Yeah, it does.
It used to, but and that's why it's a contentious issue, because if a franchisor has a network of a lot of company-owned stores and they think that they can pick up a bargain because of that clause, using the clause in the wrong way, they can. Because the franchisee, if they just say, no, that franchisee doesn't, I don't like the girl with the red hair, or I don't like the what they're wearing, and so I'll say no, they keep it not approving sales because they want the site, because they're going to buy it, whether they're going to run it or whether they're going to run it and flip it.
Well, that's just dog shit.
Yeah, and it is, but that's why this is an ethical question as much as a law question, because the franchisor's motivation may not be for that franchisee to get their return on investment out.
But that is just so short-sighted. So short-sighted.
Yeah, because you're stuck with a franchisee who doesn't want to be there.
But you want stories and you want businesses. You want a franchise system where people can get out and realise their efforts, their profits. So why? It's so short-sighted. Why would you not just let that happen and go and open up other ones? It's greed. That is pure greed.
Well, sometimes it's because historically they've had a few franchise disputes, and they go, you know what? I'm done with franchising. I'm just going to buy them all. But you can't. So you just sit
Do
back
that, exactly.
and you do that. So there are this is why we've got, we've talked about regulation in franchising, and this is why we have these laws, because franchisors have done this the wrong. We've acted for franchisees that are in this situation and they're stuck. They can't sell their business. There's no buyers. The only buyer is the franchisor, and the franchisor is just waiting for something to go wrong, either the agreement to expire and then
or to terminate based on some very small breach.
So that's why it's a dilemma, an ethical dilemma for the business ethics of the franchisor from the start as much as legal. Now, I'm going to roll the next part of the topic. Sorry to cut you off before, is return on investment. So the code has now changed, which comes in November. You can talk about this, Jane, but what's happened and why, what this is going to do now.
Well, it will actually be interesting because now the code will require franchisors to provide franchisees with reasonable opportunity to return on investment. So I would love to see in a couple of years how that affects the exact situations we're talking about, because arguably if a franchisee cannot sell their business and they can't return on their original investment, can they sue the franchisor for denying them the reasonable opportunity?
But this really worries me, this one, because you've got one, if you got a return on an investment, and this might be a bit old school, but we would never give anyone what we believe that site should be turning over. You just shouldn't do that.
Yeah.
So I'm assuming nowadays that is still the same, unless you can.
Well, that's about
warrant turnover.
That's a bit about making because one of the biggest issues for disputes is representation.
Yes.
So the fear from the legal community, to protect their franchisor clients, is don't make representations
and we've always
that come
advised
back and bite you, because unless there's a reasonable basis for it. So at Michelle's with 360 stores, you could have been putting, high merit, low and merit. You've got a lot of, got a lot
Actual data.
You've got data, right? But if you're an emerging franchisor, okay, and you've got 12 sites and you're like, and they're all in strip shops in the suburbs, but I'm going to stick one in Collins Street and my rent's going to be double,
Yep.
That's a tricky thing for you. But it's not my money, it's the franchisee's money because they're the one that are taking the punt that the rent's double what it is in Dandenong. So these are the sorts of things that they want the franchisors to go through and go, is there an opportunity to make a reasonable return on opening in the city compared to Dandenong?
But if you're a franchisor and you're offering up a site or you're agreeing to a site, which is a whole other story.
Yes.
Then you must believe, if you're prepared to sell it to someone, that site will give them a reasonable return on investment.
That's right. So that's what it's saying.
Issue.
So which is why I'm not so much that this is a bad thing, because what I think it's going to do is make franchisors
more accountable
for this decision, because in the past, if the franchisor doesn't take on the lease,
they don't care.
It's not them.
They
that's
care
gonna
much less. Let's put it that way.
Yeah.
A whole lot less.
But that's what it comes down to. Like, so here's one where we've just taken back a store. They were doing 3,000 to 4,000 a week. In 4 months later, we've got that to 12,000.
Wow.
Okay, so their return on investment was shit, obviously.
Yeah.
Because they didn't work the business. They were a poor performer, didn't follow the system, and they could then come back to us and say there's an ROI.
Yeah, but I think I actually disagree with you there, because if they were a poor performer and they didn't comply with the system, then they should have been educated, trained, franchisor did everything they could and then exited because they're not performing and they're not trying to do the right thing.
Yep.
That's a very different scenario to not returning on investment, because it's their own doing.
Okay, so here's a business where you got to go out into, I like this. This is a good discussion. Where you got to go out into the community, and that person who was running it was very shy, just didn't want to do it, uncomfortable doing it. The shop would be dirty, so we'd have to come in, get them to clean it, all that sort of stuff, get them compliant, blah blah blah.
Yeah.
But they just never went out into the community. So that we can't go and do that for them.
Is that a requirement of the process and the system?
There's an expectation that they have to go out and market. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, so it's a bit.
But you know what I'm getting at?
No, but it's a bit about the
it's-
legal obligations of are you in breach because you haven't gone out into the community, or but it's a little bit flip it around the other side as a franchisor. It's about training and development and it's support and all that.
100%.
Yeah, so I think there's franchising is all about a partnership between two business owners to try and do that, and so the franchisor needs the system and processes, and the franchisee needs to follow them.
But also, can I bring it back
Excuse me.
completely? A person like that, a franchisor should potentially have realised that in their recruitment process before bringing them on board. That they may not be the ideal franchisee for this brand.
It is, and look, it's hard. I know in the Michelle's days, I remember we picked there was a husband and wife couple from Donut King that were fantastic at what they did and sold it and sold very well. And they came in and just tried to change everything and stuffed the system. Whereas we got a cop. I remember we got a cop in, and he was at Stud Park, and we were a little worried about it, but he was the best franchisee we ever had because he just was disciplined
A cop
and did
would
it.
know how to follow a system.
Yeah.
It's like the military and elite sports people are often good at.
Exactly.
But I suppose the impact what worries you is it's like any employee, you're going to have someone that's really, really good, and you're going to have someone that's, really, really bad.
I think potentially now what is going to happen is franchisors will need to be more diligent and accountable on a number of levels at recruitment stage, at sort of when they see that the franchisee induction training, retraining, making sure that, that franchisees are not breaching, but that they supporting them as well.
And have been across their numbers because,
Exactly.
the system might have been the early franchisees might have been profitable, but things might have changed. Like delivery, Uber's been a massive change for
Huge.
For, like if you're paying Uber whatever it is 30% to deliver your pizzas, that's a massive cost that wasn't there when the franchisor started the business. So the business model needs to adapt for delivery methods and restaurants. So we talked to another franchisor that had massive restaurants and that people in dining. It's changed. People dine differently.
So here's where, tell me if we're running out of time, but here's one that we're going through at the moment, that the business is selling. The people that are running it have been underperforming, but they've done deals with Uber and promotions through Uber because they promote a lot of it themselves, where they're excellent discounts. The franchisee effectively makes bugger all money out of it, but tops up the sales. So the sales look good, but the profitability is shite. If the purchaser is looking at the sales, and I've given them a P&L to get them to work it out and challenge it.
Yeah.
But I know that that's what they're doing.
But the thing is, a purchaser,
Do I tell them?
Any purchaser should do their own due diligence, go and see accountants, show accountants the numbers, and obviously a decent accountant will work out that that's exactly what's happening.
Yeah. So the last question, which is kind of the starting question, is for a franchisor, and the franchisee is selling the business and it's too much.
Yeah.
Right. So your dilemma now is that someone's going to pay more than this business. So instead of paying 2 or 3 times, and you've worked out the numbers, and it makes whatever $200,000, and you say, well, I reckon it's if someone paid $450, maybe that's okay, two times, but they're paying $800 for the business.
So they'll never get a return.
They're never going to get a return on investment. But from a franchisor point of view, what do you do? Because you can't. Can you not approve it because the franchisee's a wood duck?
Yeah, look, that doesn't sit well with me because we're taking on the problem.
Yeah.
I would have to say something.
But I think it's also, John, now was talking to them about all the significant capital expenditure and expenses and everything else. As you said, sales may be through the roof, but if the expenses are almost there, this is where you need to sit with them and talk about the expenses
Definitely.
that they are spending, and it's especially the significant capital expenditure. But as part of that discussion and as part of showing that you are giving them that opportunity to return on investment, there needs to be some form of a discussion about return on investment without necessarily giving them accounting advice about, these figures are shonky.
Problem is a lot of this happens in the last sort of 3 months, 4 months, so they haven't done financial figures, or they mightn't have done a BAS statement yet. And I made a decision probably this week really, that any business that we invest in has to have an approved bookkeeper, and we will see that money happen every single time, because it's I've seen it in the last 6 months a lot, where it turns out they haven't even done their BAS statement, or they haven't done
At franchisor or franchisee level?
Franchisee level.
Yeah.
And I just, as responsible franchisors, we need to have full visuals of their financials. I don't give a fuck who that upsets.
Have a look at the
too
agreement
critical.
though, because a lot of franchise agreements allow franchisors to request
Financials.
and potentially BAS statements and stuff. And they also have to be compliant with all laws. There's, the overarching compliance with all laws. If they're late, they potentially are breaching some form of tax law.
I know we're going over time, but the only thing that I have got in my mind at the moment of how I judge an incoming franchisee is Oracle.
Yeah.
And the training program goes without saying. But what else have I got to know what's happening in their head?
Yeah. So I think there's a bit of that, but I think, like the new laws are going to, like as Jane said, bring flesh out a bit more accountability at a franchisor level, which it's a more compliance and more grey area for franchisors to deal with, but ultimately good franchise systems should have my first question to you, you should be more involved.
Yep.
And so now legally you're going to need to be more involved.
Yeah.
You're going to need to know your numbers. You're going to need to understand the process.
And you can't be in a position when they settled and you don't know about it because nothing's happened. No one's exited their franchise agreement. No one's signed new documents. You know, you don't have a new franchisee. Can't do it.
I'm going to cut it there.
Yep.
Franchising Uncut is now cut. Thank you very
Excellent.
much.
Well cut.
Good discussion.
Rock on.
For those of you listening today, remember to like and share. Thanks for enjoying another BDC podcast.
Thank you very much.